Hey, Ryan.
Hey man, what's up?
What do you know? Here we are.
This is Ethan Iverson. If you're a fan of jazz music, you know who Ethan is. For almost 2 decades, he played piano in the iconic trio The Bad Plus, and before that, he was the music director of the Mark Morris dance group. He has spent a lot of time on the bandstand with jazz royalty like Billy Hart and Albert Tootie Heath, and has had bylines in The New Yorker and The Nation, amongst many other publications. Ethan is an overachiever, motivated not by accolades, but by a deep love of music, a fact which is made apparent in his important blog, Do the Math. For about 15 years now, Ethan has been interviewing jazz masters, transcribing countless solos, offering his opinions, and chronicling the history of jazz music. In many ways, Score Study is my attempt at bringing something like Do the Math to YouTube. On January 29th, Ethan released a new album called Bud Powell in the 21st Century on Sunnyside Records, and we caught up over Zoom to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually how we met. That's how I knew to call you for Pepperland, is you edited these Bud Powell parts.
Mm-hmm.
Because I asked Darcy James Argue to do it, and he said he was too busy or too expensive or something like that. Totally fair. And I said, well, who can I get? And he suggested you. And so then that's actually how I knew to call you for Pepperland. I remember being like, do you play soprano? I mean, I hardly knew you.
That's why I'm really excited for this video in particular, because I'm in a somewhat unique position to talk about Ethan's music. As he alluded to, I played his ballet, Pepperland, daily with Ethan for 2 months in the UK. Pepperland, for those of you who don't know, is based on the Beatles' groundbreaking record, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and it was written for the Mark Morris dance group. Right before that tour, I saw the premiere of Ethan's piano concerto, Concerto to Scale, which he performed with the American Composers Orchestra. And during all of this time, I worked with Ethan as he wrote and prepared to perform his first evening-length big band concert, Bud Powell in the 21st Century, which is actually the first of any of these projects to see an international release. And I have a theory about all of it. In many ways, you could say that Ethan Iverson is in his neoclassical phase, akin to Stravinsky's work from the 1920s until roughly the 1950s. A century after Stravinsky, Iverson too is eschewing the iconoclastic complexity of his previous work in favor of an aesthetic that is grounded in clarity, restraint, and balance. In this video, Ethan will guide us through his musical world, offering clues along the way from Bud Powell, Igor Stravinsky, and others. This is Score Study with me, Brian Krock.
If you're into like reading what the great musicians say about this music, they all mention Bud Powell.
Earl Rudolph Powell, or Bud as everyone knew him, was born in Harlem, New York City on September 27, 1924. His father was a stride piano player, and he and his little brother Richie Powell both successfully pursued piano as a career. By his late teens, Mr. Powell was playing professionally, and importantly, he was hanging out regularly with a mentor figure, Thelonious Monk.
He and Monk were very close. And I think that he got a lot from Monk in terms of harmonic perspective. There's a lot of stuff the two of them know that nobody else knows. I mean, even if you transcribe it, even if you play it, you don't really know it the way it sounds when they play it. Compared to most people we think of as bebop pianists, if you actually look at what Bud plays, there's a lot of stuff that's a little off.
Unfortunately, there hasn't been enough scholarship and research about Mr. Powell's life and work. Even today, he remains a relatively obscure figure, even in the world of jazz. By far the best resource available for understanding Powell's musical output comes from Ethan's exhaustive cluster of essays, Burning Down the House.
Bud is comparatively mysterious and comparatively hard to find, I would say. The very top peak Bud isn't necessarily lying out in plain view.
Right.
I wouldn't say that too many of his records are that bad, but there are records that are better than others. Even the one famous session with horns, Fats Navarro and Sonny Rollins and Roy Haynes topping Potter, I don't know if you can just play those for a civilian and have the civilian just get it.
Right.
It's pretty intellectual. It's pretty untheatrical. It's pretty concentrated, and it's pretty raw. Once you can play the music and you start to unlock some secrets, the more you listen, the more you realize how profound it is. Like limitlessly profound.
Because Ethan unlocked so many of Mr. Powell's secrets on Do the Math, Enzo Capua approached him with an idea to have him compose an evening-length Bud Powell tribute concert for the Umbria Jazz Festival in Perugia, Italy. Ethan delivered Bud Powell in the 21st Century, a score which we are lucky enough to delve into a little bit later. For now, all you really need to know is that Ethan approached this project with reverence. The plan was effective in its simplicity. Ethan would arrange 4 of Mr. Powell's greatest compositions for the Umbria Jazz Orchestra and intersperse a series of original chorales which draw obliquely from Powell's vocabulary. In addition, a core quintet featuring trumpeter Ingrid Jensen, tenor saxophonist Dana Stevens, bassist Ben Street, and drummer Louis Nash play a few small combo numbers with the exact same form and intent as the classic recordings of Bud Powell's quintet with Sonny Rollins and Fats Navarro. On the forefront of Ethan's mind was staying true to the original music. I thought it was really a super hip decision on your part to, for example, just have the saxophones play whole Bud Powell solo in unison I believe in Celia. As if to say there's no way to improve this, first of all. And secondly, they should know it. So, you know what I mean? Like
it's funny when you harmonize those things. I don't know if it sounds any good. Like there's that super sax stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
God bless. I'm not trying to dog super sax. I mean, God bless, really. But for whatever I want to communicate in terms of an aesthetic, that's too fussy, just too fussy. You know. And I do think, in terms of the line, in terms of those bebop lines, the more harmony you add in those inner voices, the more you just change the emotional statement of the music.
So, if you look at the score for Ethan's Celia arrangement while listening to Bud's original recording, you'll really see that Ethan kept it simple. In measure 47, the saxophones play Bud's right hand in unison. Frankly, a fairly unusual texture for a big band saxophone section. Meanwhile, trombones 2 and 3 are playing the simple chord structures that Powell employs with his left hand, and Ethan fleshes these out by doubling the bass in the bass trombone and using the most obvious upper extensions in trombone 1. He sprinkles on top of that just the slightest bit of rhythmic interest. The trombones play syncopated anticipations, a la Count Basie, with the occasional chromatic flourish.
Well, you know, the first thing I did is I wrote a 11-minute arrangement of John's Abbey, which was full of stuff. Man, it had everything but the kitchen sink in there. There was counterpoint. There was a million soli. There was a zillion things. Big climax, maybe a key change. After I did all that, I was like, God, Ethan, don't do any of this. Don't do it, man. So I sort of got it out of my system, and I, file 13 for that arrangement. Sometimes I will do that. I think something like that happened for Pepperland too. Maybe even the piano concerto, where there's just a first initial, like just a bunch of stuff, But then at the end of the day, I really believe in simplicity. The music I like in jazz tends to be simple. We're praising Stravinsky here. Compared to a lot of his peers, Stravinsky is simple. You can find almost any other famous 20th century composer. They actually write harder music than Stravinsky. And Mr. Monk himself, I mean, I'm not saying it's not hard music, but at the same time, it's what makes Monk or Bacharach or whoever you think is a great composer. It tends to be just the durability of the ideas.
At the end of the day, these arrangements are really just about showcasing music that is already perfect and acknowledging the futility of trying to improve upon it. But Mr. Iverson's original compositions are of an entirely different order. Throughout the opening eponymous composition and the closing piece, Nobile Paradiso, there are so many kinks that I even had the audacity to suggest to Ethan while we were working on it that they were mistakes.
Well, actually, there was also a funny moment with you in editing. You probably don't remember this, but you're like, I think this is a bar off in the Nobile Paradiso. And, I've just felt so happy that somehow a lot of it was wrong. It was not wrong.
I remember this now. Yeah.
And then there was another certain person who looked at the score of the chorale and they're like, no.
This seems wrong.
This is wrong. And I'm like, I'm just there smiling. This is why, I mean, this is how you have a voice. If you have an idiom that is at all your personal, is because you make decisions that other people don't make.
So after working with Ethan over the ensuing year, I began to realize that these mistakes were a common feature of all of his recent work as a composer. There's a really clear sort of device, I think, in Stravinsky that I wonder if Bud Powell might have also checked out that music because you hear it in Glass Enclosure. And this is having triads with one wrong note. And you seem to have stolen that idea and put it to a ton of use in this new Bud Powell music.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, they are almost Stravinsky-esque in the sense that there's no way to explain it other than it sounds good. I remember buying the score to Stravinsky's Serenade in A and playing through it and thinking, there's room for me to steal this stuff. Like a lot of room. Probably for you and for everybody else in this game, Stravinsky is someone that there's probably just some moment where you're like, oh man, I love Stravinsky so much. And then you listen to all of Stravinsky. It's like, that's just what you have to do at some point. Earlier, I said Ethan was going through a Stravinskyan neoclassical phase in his career. But what did I mean by that? Igor Stravinsky was born in Russia on June 17, 1882, and he is probably still best known for some of his earlier ballets, such as The Firebird and The Rite of Spring. Somebody once told me the world is on a roll. Stravinsky wrote those incredible pieces of music when he was in his late 20s and his 30s, about the same age that Ethan Iverson was when he made his best-known work with the trio The Bad Plus. But when Mr. Stravinsky was on the cusp of middle age, he became focused, as I said earlier, on restraint, economy, balance, clarity. For that reason, he was often accused of retreating into conservatism, an unfair and uncreative assessment that I'm sure has also probably been levied at Mr. Iverson as well. Famously, in 1945, Pierre Boulez, then 20 years old, booed Stravinsky at a performance of his Four Norwegian Moods, later claiming that he thought neoclassicism was a dead end. In hindsight, even to Boulez, that adolescent opinion was short-sighted. In reality, Stravinsky was experimenting as feverishly as ever, just he was doing so within the constraints of common forms. There's actually many similarities, I think, of harmonic outlook between Mr. Monk and Mr. Stravinsky, especially Stravinsky's neoclassic work. So Monk was sort of my first idol, And that first time playing through Serenade in A, I was like, this is pretty monkish. And I've never changed my mind about that.
Right there is an important clue into understanding Iverson's oeuvre. So let's dig into the Serenade in A just a little bit. The composition for solo piano was completed in 1925 for the purpose of being performed by Stravinsky himself in solo recitals that were intended to add an extra revenue stream to his unfortunately modest composition career. The Serenade is in 4 movements, but you'll see most clearly what I'm getting at here in the 3rd movement, the rondoletto. The very first beat of the first measure subverts the written key signature as the pianist plays a C-sharp minor chord in the left hand while playing an A natural in the right hand. The 5th of that C-sharp minor chord, G-sharp, clashes momentarily but monumentally with the melody, creating a very dissonant minor 9th interval. Immediately, something feels wrong, and that nagging imbalance stubbornly abounds. Listen to a little more while I highlight the dissonant intervals. Now, the intended effect, I think, is deeply ironic. The trappings of the pianistic style remind you of Czerny, Hanon, Alberti bass, classic piano etudes. Yet the actual pitch material chafes in its constrictions, clamoring for release. I told Ethan that for me, it's impossible not to hear echoes of this anarchy in the abstract polytonality of Bud Powell's glass enclosure. Measure 2 of Ethan's transcription shows a series of triads which are superimposed upon bass notes which are sometimes in the chord and sometimes completely wrong. Again and again, I found similar intentional errors in Ethan's ballet score, Pepperland. Similarly, the first movement of Bud Powell in the 21st century is filled with deliberate dissonances, delivered under the casual guise of tonality.
One of my theories about a hit tune is that there's unexpected details in it. Any hook is almost by definition asymmetrical. You know, when I am in charge of writing a good melody, that is something I keep in mind, is I don't have to worry about being too parallel or something like that. In fact, if I can find the sweet spot where it seems natural enough and it's a bit of an earworm, but actually it's asymmetrical, then that's the secret sauce.
Check out the chorale movement of the composition Bud Powell in the 21st century. The very first vertical sonority consists of 4 pitches: E flat, D flat, G, and D natural. Immediately, the listener feels an uncomfortable tickle. What exactly was that chord? Over the bass note, E flat, the trumpet section plays the major 7th, D natural, while the tenor saxophones intone the dominant 7th, D flat. That minor 9th between D flat and D is deeply disorienting, confusing, exciting. And we don't have much time to consider that sound before we're confronted with another chord. B flat, D, A flat, and E flat. Okay, something is not working here. We have another minor 9th interval, this time between the D natural and the E flat, the major 3rd and the 4th above B flat. And I could continue on in this manner, showing you every vertical sonority, but you get the idea. Wrongness is not a fault, but a feature of Iverson's oeuvre. Oh, I think he's gonna love that. I mean, the melody is wrong too. Measure 3 is clear enough. We hear an A-flat 6-9 chord on beat 1, whose inner voices shift chromatically. First to A-flat minor 6-9, and then to an E major over G sharp with a sharp 11. Our ears expect a resolution at this point, and it would be only logical to resolve to a G natural in the melody over some kind of an E-flat major chord. Instead, Ethan gives us these 4 pitches: G, E flat, C, and F sharp. This sonority is equal parts major and minor, with the major third in the bass and the minor third, a major seventh above that, in the treble.
I'm not going to allow in anything that doesn't have, in my opinion, the correct signature.
Is that signature something concrete that you could describe, or do you just have faith that it will bloom in the music because you're making it?
I'm pretty deliberate about it, but I can't. You know, the thing is, Ryan, I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you. Then if you put this on YouTube, then I have to go find every single person who saw it. So, there's just some secrets that just, I can't give away on the YouTube channel. Not yet, anyway.
Ethan was incredibly generous in sharing information about his writing process for the big band. In fact, we talked for an hour and a half, and that full interview is available on my Patreon page. But as open as he was to talk about the music, he hesitated when I asked him to define his aesthetic. And that is exactly how it should be. I mean, I'll never forget that video where Bill Evans' brother, Harry, recounts asking Bill to teach him some of his secrets. And Bill's response was,
I don't want to deprive you of the pleasure of finding this out for yourself, and for that reason, I'm not going to show you a thing.
With Bud Powell in the 21st century, I think that Ethan Iverson has succeeded in creating big band music that doesn't sound quite like anything else that preceded it. The same can be said of Pepperland or of his concerto to scale. My message then to young composers who might be watching this video is never stop exploring. And it's so cool that you continue to transcribe. I remember seeing, we had like a long bus ride and you transcribed like a full Joe Henderson solo just sitting on the bus. And I just remember thinking like, this is so goddamn hip that you're still so just, if anything, more curious the more time passes. Would you say that that's accurate?
Yeah, well, I always quote Mark Turner at this point, who told me it takes us longer to be greater now because we have so much more to learn. And I do think we're in this postmodern age of managing the information. Specifically in jazz, I mean, I'm not sure how many icons we've had since Coltrane. Joe Henderson would be one, yes. But there's, mostly we're just trying to still figure out assemblages of, what the top tier left us. There's certain things that I still need to work on for sure. When I was a kid, quite young, I thought I want to have it together when I'm 50. I'm 47 now, and I can say I'm pretty much on course. Not too far off, anyway. I don't think I'm going to wake up on my 50th birthday and be like, I got it.
Yeah.
But it's actually...
You're on the right track, objectively. All right, thank you everybody so much for watching this video. If you've made it this far, I think you should really check out my Patreon page, because there you'll find scores, transcriptions, exercises, unreleased and alternate takes of my bands, Big Heart Machine and Little, stuff to practice, and more. You can even sign up through Patreon to study privately with me. And thank you as always to my patrons who make these videos possible. I appreciate you all. I need some sort of like a phrase for signing off from these videos. Maybe give me your suggestions in the comments section. For now, I'll just say, until next time.